I have only been knitting for about 15 months, but as you can see from this slideshow, it's got slightly out of hand in the best possible way. I absolutely love knitting. I've been documenting my journey of learning how to knit on this channel. And one of the biggest questions I get asked is, Lena, if I want to start knitting, what is the bare min I need? None of the bullshit, none of the extras, none of the little capitalist gadgets that they try and sell you on Instagram. What do I actually need to knit? I have recently, not to flex, started knitting intermediate patterns, and it's really, really exciting. So I feel like I'm just out of the barrier of beginner and into the intermediate, but so fresh that I completely remember how confusing it was to be a beginner knitter. And I'm not yet at that point where I've started accumulating all of these essential items that you don't necessarily need. So I'm going to go through a list of things that generally people tell you that you need on the internet for knitting, and I'm going to tell you yay or nay. Are we keeping or are we completely unhauling that from your shopping list? Let's go. So the first thing, might be mildly obvious, is needles. You do actually, unfortunately, need needles. You actually don't. Actually, I'm lying to you. You can actually knit with your hands if you have really massive yarn. I've seen people do it, but that is out of my jurisdiction, above my pay grade. No idea how that works. This is what I started on. A pair of plastic needles from the charity shop. These cost me £1. I soon learned that charity shops always have knitting needles, but they don't necessarily have them on display. So the one that I go to, I have to go up to the counter and they have like a big basket of them under the counter for me to look through. If you're lucky, you can also get wooden needles from the charity shop, and I have become an absolute wooden needle snob in my old knitting age. But that is pure preference. These work just as well, and because I got them secondhand, they are incredibly cheap. And I think if you just want to try and knit for the first time, some standard straight needles like this, just to work out if you even like it or it just pisses you off and you'd rather be dead, I'd advise these. However, if you have any inkling that you might start getting into knitting in even a medium kind of way, can I strongly advocate for something called interchangeable circular needles. These are what circular needles look like. Basically think of it as extra storage on your needles. Essentially what knitting is having loads of stitches on one end and then passing them to the other needle, and you're kind of tipping them between the needles, and every time you tip them you add a row. With a straight needle like this, I can only keep a certain amount of stitches on the needle, but if I have a wire like this, I can store the stitches and knit for as long as I like. Visual example, this is a blanket I'm currently trying to knit. Don't look at my stitches, it's bad. It's the first time I'm doing colour work, give me a break. But do you see the potential for having a long string? Now I said interchangeable because these ones aren't interchangeable. You have to have this length of string and this type of needle, and that's your bag. If you want to do something different, you have to buy new needles or buy new string or rope or whatever. Cable, that's the word. But with these interchangeable needles, you'll see that they come without strings on the end. Then I can buy the cord and screw them on, and I can do loads of different variations of how long or short I'd like them to be. Don't get ahead of yourself, but that is very important when you start to knit in the round, which is another cool thing you can do. So you're not just knitting flat, you're knitting a tube, which is a really fun way to knit a balaclava or knit a jumper. So these have more functions. It means that if you break your needle, which I have done before, you don't need to buy a whole other new needle and cord. You can just replace one part. So I think it's more sustainable, just saying, long term. It is, however, a problem that they're kind of like a new trend. They're definitely the CD-ROMs of the tape age. So they're not as available secondhand, but if you're serious about it and you know that you want to try it, I think they really can last you a lifetime. And I wish I'd never fucked around with even collecting these. I'm actually slowly giving them away to people. When somebody tells me they want to take up knitting, I teach them on the needles and then I just give them to them. There will also be on the internet these circular needle kits. I opted out of that just because I didn't want to buy all the needles. I've been buying needle sizes project to project depending on if I actually am going to use them rather than having a whole set of them. I found that to be around the same price, if not cheaper, because I don't want every size of needle, but they do look beautiful beautiful, and I can understand why people might want them, but I don't think I'm unhauling those. You don't need them. Next is yarn. Yes, you will need some yarn. I knit with 100% wool because it's more sustainable and I really, really like the feel of it. But you can knit on anything you like. There is so much secondhand yarn out there to try before you start buying new stuff or start picking colours that you particularly like. I just grab whatever is already around and in the world and just see if you like it. Something that I wish somebody had told me was how tactile knitting is and how part of the joy of it is how it feels to you. So I think it's totally fine to really experiment with what kind of needles you like touching and which kinds of yarn you like squeezing. There's a lot of polyester or plastic like yarn that really makes me shiver. Like, I don't like it. I'm also one of those people who doesn't like cotton wool. Like, ugh, it makes a sound, just thinking about it's making me a bit weird. So I think it's important to not shop online for yarn if you're a beginner and really go around and feel it and decide whether you like holding it. I know it's weird, but this is supposed to be for fun. It is supposed to be a hobby. You're supposed to enjoy how it feels. There are lots of guides on the internet about how to buy yarn, but I would also just lean into the Marie Kondo, does it spark joy? You can worry about the functions and details of yarn later, but as a very, very beginner, just make sure it feels nice. Next, tapestry needle. This is just a really thick, almost blunt version of a normal hand sewing needle, and unfortunately, yes, you do need it. It is incredibly boring at the end of a project to weave in your ends, but let me show you what it looks like before you weave in your ends. This is a jumper that I have finished knitting, but I haven't sewn together yet. I've knitted it flat, if this is making any sense to you. I've knitted it flat, but I haven't sewn the sleeves together or anything. And I also have all of this yarn hanging out from where I was making stripes. So all of that needs to go in. And yes, you do need a tapestry needle. The good news is they cost pennies. I actually just keep one in my purse now so that I just always have one on me. Oh my God, I am 34, aren't I? Anyway, next is special scissors for cutting your yarn. You don't need it. It doesn't matter. Unlike with sewing, where it actually does matter that you have specific fabric scissors that you only use for fabric, this is not necessary in any way. Do not bother. I knit with quite chunky yarn, which means that if I do need to cut it, I can literally just pull the fibers apart and do it like that if I don't have scissors handy, but you just don't need them. If you want to buy some fancy bird-looking scissors or some nice psychedelic mermaid ones, be my guest. They genuinely look lovely, but can I borrow them, please? No, I'm kidding. You don't need them. Next is a project bag. This is just a place where you keep your projects. You can just use any tote bag. You can even make your own bag if you want. I use this dead stock fabric upcycled fabric plant pot that I got from Lucy and Yak. It's supposed to be a plant pot like that, but I just use it as a project bag, and I put a safety pin at the top to close it when I take it around with me on the train, and it works fine. I guarantee that you have a fabric bag of some sort. It doesn't even need to be a fabric bag. You have a bag. You get the idea. We don't need a project bag. Just don't be silly. Blocking mat. This is after you have knit up something and it's finished like this. You'd wash it once, just dunk it in some water, rinse it out and block it so that all of the kinks that have happened when it was rolled into a ball of wool or when you've been knitting it all come out and it lays beautiful and flat. This is also where you can manipulate the size and the shape of the garment a little bit, depending. So it is a cool step, but I've been knitting jumpers and vests and multiple hats without having a blocking mat. And if I have blocked something, I've either just blocked it on a towel and just put pins in it to keep it down, or I've lain it on a tea towel and then just pegged the outer parts of it to keep it in place and then put it on a bench outside. They are kind of expensive. They do take up a lot of storage room. So far I haven't needed them and I don't really foresee a future where I would. Again, a lovely luxury, and if you want to get them or you already have them, I'm sure you're enjoying them, but personally I haven't found myself missing them. A needle gauge. This is a little tool that has little teeth missing out of it, and you use it to measure what size of needle you are currently holding in your hands. If you have loads of secondhand unmarked needles, it's quite useful so you don't forget, but honestly most of my needles do have a marking on them, and it's only if the marking starts rubbing off. I got this because some of the markings started rubbing off on my other needles and it was distressing me. So they're usually very cheap. I think this one was about £2.50, and they're a very harmless piece of apparatus, but I've only just got one, and admittedly I don't really need it. I'm just lazy and I can't remember what size my needles are sometimes, but honestly I would would wait until you've got a little collection of needles that you really like, and then see if they're ones where the numbers wear off on before you jump in and get one of these, because I don't know, if I could go back in time, I probably wouldn't get this. It was definitely a bit of an impulse purchase when I was at a really nice yarn shop and I was just by the till and I was like, oh, go on then, £2.50. But 100% unhaul if I could be a time traveller. Stitch markers. These come in various different levels of luxury. They're basically there to mark your rows and mark where you've got to in a project. Sometimes they mark where you want the sleeves to be, that kind of thing. And I don't own any because they're essentially just safety pins. Glorified safety pins. So I either use safety pins to mark my rows, or if I'm knitting in the round and I need them to go over my needle, I simply just used a different colour bit of thread and I just tie that around and it works exactly the same, and I'm not stressed about losing it. Unless I get a beautiful gift of some of these, I don't think I'm ever gonna have any in my possession. I don't really see the point in them. They obviously bring joy to people and it might be good if you're doing a very complicated pattern, but I'm not ever going to want to do that. So for me personally, I'm completely unhauling those. However, something that on other people's lists is a luxury or a bonus, or a lot of knitters I know just don't have one, or have even when I've been knitting next to them been like, what's that? Is a row counter. I don't know what I did before having this. This is just a tiny little clicker, kind of when you walk into a museum or a nightclub and they like click you in. It's literally just that. This costs £5. You can get them for 2 or 3. And because I'm somebody who's knitting while I'm doing other stuff or talking, just having some kind of grasp on how many rows or repetitions of a pattern I've done is literally life-changing. Again, this is supposed to be fun and one I'd love to be able to keep all that information in my head. It's not really a priority when I'm trying to relax and switch off. So just after every row being able to go, it used to make a cool clicking sound. I've kind of broken it, I'll be honest. So I just have to turn it manually, but it used to have a little click. Just be able to do that every time. It's also just very viscerally satisfying. Just a little, oh, I love it. I'm never going anywhere without this. Beyond yarn and needles, I would say this is my third desert island knitting thing. Like I should, if somebody was like, you can't use row counters anymore, I'd literally be like, do I even want to knit? So that's me conversely kind of rehauling something onto your list that might not have been there. But I do think if you're thinking about buying any of this paraphernalia, if your brain works anything like mine, please get one of these. And then finally, a ball winder. I don't have one of these, so I can't show it to you, but they look like this. And people in knitting videos all over the internet have them, and it's a beautiful part of their like aesthetic and their process, and it looks fun. I, however, can't even imagine where I would even begin to store something like that. And I have found so far that I don't need one. If you're new and you have no idea what I'm talking about, basically a lot of the time when you buy yarn, it comes in hanks like this. It's a twist of wool that if you just tried to get the end of it and knit with it, it would unravel and you'd end up in knots. So ideally you're looking for a ball of wool like this, and what you do is you untwist the yarn like that, and you see that it's actually a big circle of yarn. Your task, should you choose to accept it, is to lay that out, find an end, and then roll it into a ball. If I do this by hand, it probably takes me about 15 minutes max, maybe 20 while I'm watching a film or a TV show. I just do it by lying it on the floor and just following it round, and if it gets twisted, I untwist it. But you can put them on the back of chairs, and I've also got a glamorous assistant to just sit there for 15 minutes and do this while I wind it up. And that's it. Like, I don't need one. I don't think they're really that important unless you're dealing with very fine yarn or you are a prolific knitter who's knitting every single day and therefore goes through a lot of yarn. But because this is a hobby for me and it's something that I actually like, I like it taking up time. I don't mind if something is a little bit longer to do because it feels nice. It's an enjoyable process. It's rewarding, and it's something I can do while I'm doing other things. For me, knitting also functions as something I can do with my hands that helps me concentrate on something else I'm doing, like listening to an audiobook or watching a film or even being part of a conversation. So the fact that something takes longer to me is actually a plus, weirdly enough. And for that reason, especially as a beginner, I am 100% unhauling ball winders for you. I have no idea whether this video is particularly particularly contentious or controversial, because while I love knitting, I don't really feel like I'm that integrated into the internet knitting scene. So I'm sorry if that offended any of you, and I'm very happy if you have any of those tools and they genuinely bring joy and better practice to your life. I'm just telling you from my perspective, if you're a beginner and you don't want to sink loads of money into it at the beginning, that at least half of it you don't really need to bother with to have a good time. And isn't that what we're all here for at the end of the day? Thank you so much for watching. If you want to hear more about why I'm trying to make my own clothes, and this year I'm giving up all consumption of new and secondhand clothes. If I want it, I have to make it. You can watch this video or this video. If you would like to see me knitting this jumper, you can watch this video. Thank you so much to the Gumption Club. They tip me per video to make sure these videos keep happening. Frog slug out.